Turn to international events and discuss Ukraine, speaking of the word nuclear. So, Ukraine have carried out a strike on Russia using long-range missiles supplied by America, and so far as we know, that's a picture of them doing exactly that. Washington gave permission yesterday for them to use those missiles. They've already been using some of them, which are called Atacms, in Russian-occupied areas of their own territory. But this is the first time, with American permission, they fired them into Russia. Russia has promised to react accordingly, and we've been waiting to see what they say. Putin has signed a new decree now, which lowers the threshold at which he can authorize a nuclear strike. That means Moscow can respond with a nuclear bomb if it's attacked by any state using weapons supplied by the West. That includes missiles, aircraft, and even drones. The US have just this morning closed their embassy in Kyiv. The other thing Putin has said is, if we are attacked conventionally, we are now going to allow ourselves to respond in a nuclear way. So, Angela, I know this will make me sound like a coward, but is this the time for us to say, you know, you're in a pub and it's kicked off, and the guy at the center of the fight is 6'9", and he does cage fighting, and you just quietly leave?
Well, yes. On the one hand, that's the sensible option, because the stakes are so
really
high.
serious.
I recently, without being a sort of hysterical person, I don't know if you remember Threads, which was the BBC dramatisation of what would happen. You can find it on the internet somewhere. It would happen in real time. What would happen if a nuclear attack was launched on the UK? And it was literally sort of the countdown. And what was actually the scariest thing to me was, obviously, aside from the physical ramifications of dropping a bomb, was that it starts off with the guys in the pub, and it's on in the telly in the background, you know, troops on manoeuvre. And I wonder how far, without catastrophising, we are sleepwalking into something.
Well, yeah. Funny enough, I've just been reading Precipice by Robert Harris.
I'm reading it at the moment as well.
It's about the origins of the First World War, and the Prime Minister was entirely occupied with Irish Home Rule, nothing to do with the First World War, and he couldn't see it coming until we were actually in it. That's how weird...
After Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, which we all see as the trigger, the news that summer was dominated by a French woman who was accused of murdering someone in a kind of passionate, a crime of passion. People, and then there was all the talk in the background of rooms, of manoeuvrings, of armies, getting ready. And they thought the war would be over by Christmas. There's a long history, let's be honest, of miscalculation, where great powers have huge rivalries and tensions, and then things explode with very little build-up. And that is a danger.
Is it possible, because Biden is the one who said you can use the missiles, and by the way, landmines, anti-personnel landmines as well. Biden is obviously furious about the election. Biden wants to leave Trump with a bit of a problem, because Trump will have to rescind all of these permissions. Are we starting to think that we need Trump in this situation?
100%. 100%. Obviously, this marks a huge change in US policy. And I know we laugh repeatedly about Trump. I mean, we've spoken before about him saying to the North Koreans, my red button is bigger than your red button.
Yep. And I will blow you to smithereens.
Yes, exactly. And also,
that's what he said to Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, but he did make him smile, which was remarkable.
And you know what? There hasn't been a peep out of them since then.
Not a nuclear warhead since. But the point is that for all his deficiencies, which I know we'll discuss at some point, maybe in the papers, but the point is that he seems to have the ability to open some kind of dialogue. Now, how you dialogue with a megalomaniac who has illegally invaded a sovereign country is a question for greater minds than mine.
We know the answer, which is that Trump goes over Zelensky's head, goes to Putin and says, look, will you stop this if we give you the eastern wedge of Ukraine?
Well, I mean, look, this is difficult because Russia is illegally occupying and with a view to annexing Ukrainian land.
And it's done
in a
that
war
with
of aggression.
Crimea.
And I supported the arming of Ukraine to defend itself against that. You know, what I guess some of us might torture ourselves over is that was in principle correct. But the number now of Ukrainian, particularly young men or men, who have been slaughtered in this meat grinder is potentially hundreds of thousands, as well as the Russian men thrown by Putin into a meat grinder. And the worry is this going to end in the same way, which is basically Ukraine having imposed upon it a peace deal, so-called, which means large parts of its territory annexed. And is that going to happen, whatever happens? And the question is how many people die to get there? And I think the danger with what we're talking about here is we Western, human civilization, we take it for granted, but with a nuclear war, that's it. It's just one. And what we can see, we know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but there have been other examples in the early 80s in particular when tension between the West and the East really ratcheted up, and you have suspicion, you have a lack of communication, and it only takes one of those crises for things to escalate where the other presumes the other's attacking.
Well, that's why I just, I feel bad saying this, but is it the moment for us to just shrink away, think, well, this is not our
Well, that's going to happen anyway, whatever we say.
Let's Callum in Edinburgh, hi.
Hey. First of all, good to see Owen on the programme.
Hey, Callum, how you doing?
Hi, I've been to Russia twice. Now, Putin, he must be stopped, and we should not be afraid of him and his threats. The man is a worse dictator. He's got North Korea behind him, other places behind him. The man is crazy.
This is the classic, Callum. You and whose army? You and whose army is going to do this?
Our British army.
Yes, okay. The British army can't beat Russia on its own. Okay, can't even fill Wembley Stadium.
No, but America started, I'm so pleased to hear, to allow Ukraine to send rockets to the US.
Yeah, but you know what? Hang on. America won't be with Ukraine from January onwards because Trump doesn't like it. Okay, so we're going to have to work out how to do this without the USA.
Right. Well, we must do something. It's gone on far too long.
I know, but it's so
really
hard.
Has.
I wish
the man was assassinated, and the government, the poor people in Russia, there's much poverty. The healthcare.
Well, Callum, actually, to be honest, I agree with you about Vladimir Putin. I honestly do. He's a murderous dictator, and what he's done in Ukraine is unforgivable. I completely agree with you. Unfortunately, and this is why he's managed to get away with this in Russia, the Russian economy is doing very well, actually, and actually living standards throughout this. You get a war economy, mobilise the economy in support of a war, you can actually do quite well out of it. So that's why he's managed to kind of buy acquiescence from the Russian population. I guess my fear, Callum, is I agree with you on the principle. My worry is this going to end in the same way anyway? And the question is how many more people are slaughtered and the direction of travel. I don't think it's cowardly to be worried about two nuclear-armed blocks constantly escalating the tensions between them.
I'm trying to avoid the word cowardly, because I think we have to be a little bit realistic here. I don't know, Angela, I have read reports that for all the young Ukrainian men who've died, the cost to Russia is massive. And there's if you're a young bloke in Russia, you're trying to leave the country right now.
Yeah, unequivocally.
So there is another side to this.
Without question, I don't think there is kind of blanket patriotism. I think there is also an issue of face saving where Putin, like all the great megalomaniacs from throughout the annals of history, he wants to restore the Soviet Union.
No, Russian Empire.
Hang on a second. He wants to restore it to its former glory. And it's very difficult when this is where I think Trump does come in, because it's ridiculous that we're relying on somebody like him for the diplomacy in it. But he understands the personality involved, because you have to as much look at the personality motivating this. And the idea of losing face when a war has been prosecuted for what is it, 2 years now? There has to be, he almost has to be given something in order for him
But just a correction on that, because Putin
That's
actually hates the Soviet Union because he blames that for creating. He thinks Lenin created Ukraine, which is absurd because Ukraine was given national self-determination, its own identity. He wants the Russian Empire.
That's what I meant.
He looks back to that, absolutely, to kind of that kind of...
Well, Soviet is kind of Russian Empire, isn't it, right? the Soviet Union is.
It's been broken up into its constituent parts. He wants some kind of greater Russia, Soviet Union, call it what you will. There is otherwise, why would he just arbitrarily, launch a campaign
look at the
against
situation
Ukraine?
that Britain had with Northern Ireland. It is, you cannot hold people down. You cannot, the idea you can take a bit of Ukraine and then Ukraine says, oh, that's fine, okay, we'll leave it. You'll have terrorism there for 100 years.
I know, but this is the problem. You can never get peace without justice. And if you end up with a frozen conflict where Ukraine has suffered terrible consequences, then the war will resume.
Okay,
I guess people's worry is he'll restart if he gets an advantage.
John in Derbyshire. Hi, John.
Hi. No,
think?
I don't think we should back down. Not at all.
Okay.
He's a bully. And the trouble is, if we don't stand up to him, he will run amok. And at the end of the day, do the people of Russia want to sizzle with nuclear bombs dropping, radiation for 100 years? They don't want it. We don't want it.
Well, it's true that he would, if he bombed something, it would be a so-called pocket nuclear weapon, whatever the hell that is, and it would be, one assumes, on Ukraine, and therefore Russians would suffer as well. That's true. And you're starting to think, well, he must know that if he does that, and the radiation drifts over Poland, then NATO get involved, and then actually he could suffer some serious problems in Russia. He might get an attack on Moscow. So I don't know, even he is possibly making those calculations. Thank you, John. Later, it's the